On behalf of the St. Photios Greek Orthodox National Shrine located here in St. Augustine, Florida, along with our co-sponsors this evening, the Roman Catholic Diocese of St. Augustine, I'm delighted to welcome you to this evening's webinar. Today, September 1st, is the celebration of the Orthodox Christian Feast of the Indiction, or the beginning of the new ecclesiastical year, as well as the Day of Prayer for Environmental Protection, as declared in 1989, over 30 years ago, by our Ecumenical Patriarch, His All Holiness Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew. I'm Bishop Demetrius of Mokisos, the Hierarchical Proestamen pastor of the St. Photios Greek Orthodox National Shrine. This evening's webinar is part of a dual observance shared between the St. Photios Greek Orthodox National Shrine and the Roman Catholic Diocese of St. Augustine. Both Orthodox Christians and Roman Catholics observe the day as a special remembrance of creation and for the protection of the environment. This evening's webinar is being hosted online by the Department of Inter-Orthodox, Ecumenical and Interfaith Relations, the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America. And I'm pleased that my brother in Christ, the Roman Catholic Bishop Ordinary of the Diocese of St. Augustine, His Excellency Bishop Felipe Esteves, is with us, and I'm asking him to offer a few words of welcome as well this evening. Your Excellency.
Thank you, Bishop Demetrius, my brother, who is present in the city of St. Augustine along with me, and we are delighted to be together thanks to his invitation for this webinar on such a significant initiative of the Patriarch. 30 years ago, that means that the Greek Orthodox have been in the foresight, in the forehead of this protection of our common home. I am delighted that we are doing this together because we are all interconnected. We are all concerned in solidarity in this situation of this global pandemic, but we need to, this gives us even more incentive to be committed to the protection of the environment.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Just a few housekeeping procedures. We will be hearing from two prominent scholars in this area, the Reverend Dr. John Chryssavgis and Dr. Leon Clements, and you'll hear more about them in a second. They're each going to speak for about 15 minutes, and at the end of both of their presentations, we'll be taking your questions in the form of texting. As you know, I'm sure you're familiar by now how to do that, probably better than I am. In any case, we wish everyone a good evening, and I hope that everyone enjoys tonight's presentation. Let us begin with a short prayer. Let us pray to the Lord. Lord, have mercy. O Lord, who created the universe at the beginning and gave to each thing his own rank, do not despise the works of your hands, but with an eye of mercy look from heaven upon this vine and restore it according to your will, turning aside from it every purpose that brings corruption and every destroyer, for you are our shepherd and deliverer and savior, and from you we receive help and mercy and acts of compassion as we glorify you, O Master. Amen. It's my privilege to introduce to you the Orthodox presenter this evening, Reverend Dr. John Chryssavgis. Reverend Dr. John Chryssavgis is an author and theologian serving as Archdeacon of the Ecumenical Patriarchate and Theological Advisor to the Ecumenical Patriarch. He's a clergyman of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America. Born in Australia, he graduated from Athens University and Oxford University. His publications focus on medieval theology as well as on the history of the Eastern Church. His interests embrace the areas of spirituality and ecology. He co-founded St. Andrew's Theological College in Sydney, where he also taught at the University of Sydney. In 1995, he was appointed professor of theology at Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology and directed the religious studies program at its Hellenic College in Brookline, Massachusetts. He has published over 30 books and numerous articles in several languages. His book, Creation as Sacrament, Reflections on Ecology and Spirituality, was published in 2019 by Bloomsbury, and he lives in Maine. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you my friend and theologian and a wonderfully articulate gentleman, the Reverend Dr. John Chryssavgis.
Thank you, Your Grace. Actually, it does feel like I'm a theological observer most of the time. So, so thank you. Allow me first to thank His Grace Bishop Demetrius for initiating and organizing this webinar. And let me add that it is most fitting that this event is hosted by the Ecumenical Office of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, and that it is working with, co-sponsored by the Roman Catholic Diocese of St. Augustine and Bishop Esteves. I'm also honored to be joined by my colleague, Leanne. I begin in this way deliberately because I don't think it's coincidental or incidental that the webinar is an ecumenical event. I've come to believe that in our relationship with creation, we're all called to evoke and affirm our interconnectedness with the rest of the world. That's what I would like to call the ecumenical imperative of creation care. Because this sense of interconnectedness reminds us that the earth unites us all before and beyond any doctrinal, political, racial, or other differences. We may or may not share religious principles, ethnic backgrounds, or political convictions, but we most definitely share an experience of the earth, the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the ground that we tread, albeit not always equitably or justly. By some mysterious connection that we do not always understand, the earth reminds us of our interconnectedness. And the power of ecumenism lies in beginning to open up beyond ourselves, beyond our own, beyond our communities, beyond our individual churches. It's learning to speak the language of care, the language of compassion. It's giving priority to solidarity and service. And in this respect, creation care has a vital ecumenical dimension in that it brings us divided Christians and insulated believers before a common task that we must inevitably face together. As the Patriarch says in his encyclical for today, it is clear that the integrity of the natural environment is the shared responsibility of all inhabitants of the earth. You see, people often think of ecology as leaves and bees, as flora and fauna, as sun and soil, but it's not just that. It's about the social nexus around them. When Donald Trump took office, he announced that the US would leave the Paris Agreement on the one issue that demands a worldwide collective response to safeguard the earth for future generations. The US chose to walk away. That simply isn't the way forward in our age. Frank Sinatra's "Did It My Way" and American First policy, these are not good policy. They're certainly not good spirituality. And today, in fact, we learned that the US will not join a global effort to develop and equitably distribute a coronavirus vaccine, in part because the World Health Organization is involved, a decision that could shape the course of the pandemic and America's role in health diplomacy. And let me point out here, in case you jump too quickly to conclusions, I'm not referring to Trump as a party leader or as a scapegoat. I'm referring to Trump as a symbol of all that was already morally wrong before he took office and will most likely remain morally wrong after he leaves office. Second, let me underline the fact that the Christian approach to creation care emerges from our fundamental teaching that God created the world out of love, that God so loved the world that his word assumed flesh and dwelt among us, and that we are called to treat creation like our own flesh. For 30 years, the Ecumenical Patriarch has emphasized this, that the environment is not only a political or technological issue, it's not a fashionable exercise in public relations, it's a spiritual issue. The degradation of creation can only be reversed or resolved by addressing the moral causes of the ecological crisis. That's precisely why and where religion has a key role to play. It's a theological issue, which is why the Patriarch introduced the revolutionary notion of ecological sin, because we need to expand our understanding of sin and repentance from what we have long considered as purely individual transgression or at best social wrongdoing to a much broader, generational, even environmental abuse of God's creation. Again, as the Patriarch notes in today's encyclical, the very life of the Church is an applied ecology, and destruction of creation is an offense against the Creator, entirely irreconcilable with the basic tenets of Christian theology. Third, in order to appreciate this spiritual worldview or cosmic liturgy, as St. Maximus the Confessor called it, this vision of the world as larger than ourselves, larger than our interests, we must adopt a spirit of being lesser, a spirit of humility, a spirit of simplicity. Because far too often we look for solutions to the environmental crisis without first listening to creation. We either rush to tangible alternatives or remain complacent in our lifestyles, and we forget that it is our choices and lifestyles that led us in the first place to the situation we face. The present ecological crisis is not just the result of bad judgment or greed by some, it's also largely a result of oblivious success and development. We should try to connect the dots between military war for conquest, the lifestyle of those who control the Earth's resources, and the ecological plight of our planet. And to achieve this, we need to stop and reflect. Paradoxically, the answer may lie not so much in action as in inaction. That's what we learn from the spirituality of fasting, prayer, and asceticism. In the way of humility, of learning to tread lightly on this planet, if we are guilty of relentless waste, it may be because we've lost this spirit of compassion and sharing. So what can we do? In order to alter our self-image, what is required is nothing less than a radical reversal of our perspectives and practices. Most importantly, we must all learn to do and live with less. And that hurts. The balance of the world has been shattered. And the ecological crisis will not be solved with sentimental or political slogans, but by self-denial as a solution to self-centeredness, by learning to exercise self-restraint and a readiness to say no or enough. And here, I think, lies the heart of the problem, because we are unwilling, in fact, we violently resist any call to adopt simpler lives. We have misplaced that spirituality of simplicity or frugality. The challenge is, how do we live in such a way that promotes harmony, not division? How can we acknowledge every day that the earth is the Lord's? Which brings me to my next point, my fourth point, namely the parallels between the ecological crisis and the current pandemic. Whether speaking of climate change or COVID-19, we're dealing with an unprecedented crisis, and crisis implies judgment. We will be judged by our response to these critical phenomena that shape and jeopardize our lives. How we respond is exactly where the Church comes in. In his encyclical, the Patriarch notes the close connection between the two, the fact that during the period of the pandemic, he writes, with the mandatory restrictions of movement, the shutdown of factories, the diminishment of industrial activity and production, the fact that we observed a reduction of pollution and encumbrance of the atmosphere has proved the anthropogenic nature of the contemporary ecological crisis. I know Leanne will develop this. But in some ways, the greatest threat to our planet at this time is actually not the novel coronavirus, but climate change. The growing but largely unrecognized death toll from rising global temperatures will actually eclipse the current number of deaths from all the infectious diseases combined if planet heating emissions are not restrained. Rising temperatures and intensifying storms will cause greatest devastation in poorer, hotter parts of the world. But the economic loss from the climate crisis, as well as the cost of adaptation, will be felt all around the world, including in wealthy countries. The World Economic Forum, goodness, it's actually called for a great reset, their phrase, of capitalism in the wake of the pandemic, arguing that true sustainability will only be achieved through drastic lifestyle changes. And a team of international scientists recently concluded, in Australia, in fact, that in order to address climate change in light of COVID-19, I quote, "We cannot rely on technology and science alone. We have to change our affluent lifestyles and reduce overconsumption in combination with structural change." All this means that we cannot play politics with climate change, the defining issue of our time. We cannot play politics with science or the health of our planet and its people. When politicians dismiss the nation's top infectious disease expert as an alarmist, they're using a pejorative straight from the playbook of those who deny the science behind climate change as a hoax. The strategies used to dismiss climate change and COVID-19 actually follow a similar pattern and are employed by many of the same people. It starts with denying that the problem exists. Then people try to obstruct action, claiming it's too hard or too expensive maybe to fix. And finally, they complain that their freedom is under threat. My younger son recently told me that COVID-19 has provided us with a fascinating and invaluable social experiment. Through the pandemic, he says, scientists and some, sadly not all, civil and religious authorities asked us to do the slightest, most trivial thing for the sake of others, for the sake of the planet. Wear a mask. And still the answer is no. Still the answer is politicized. Still the answer is my rights, First Amendment. What are the chances that people will respond to having less, or hoarding less, or wasting less, and sharing more? The world is changing rapidly, and our institutions, governmental, civil, and religious, are often not keeping up, and we need to call them out when they don't. In a recent discussion, for instance, on masks, just a week or so ago, one Orthodox metropolitan, an archbishop in Cyprus, responded to a question about children wearing masks in school, and he said, if we teach our children to wear masks, then our society will soon become a community of demons, not humans. Wow. And he added, my responsible opinion is that you find a way of your children never having to wear a mask. It's preferable for them not to be educated for a few years than to go to school wearing masks. They're going to lead our society, he said, into chaos and terror. And he closed with an all too familiar refrain for us here in America. They want our freedom and our soul. It's simply inconceivable and unconscionable that a church leader, one of my church leaders, thinks, let alone speaks like this. And let me close. Permit me to highlight a recent document on the social ethos of the Orthodox Church. It's entitled For the Life of the World. It was composed by a commission of Orthodox scholars appointed by His All Holiness and blessed for publication by the Holy and Sacred Synod of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. It's already been translated into over a dozen languages. It can be easily found on the website of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, and specifically the Ecumenical Department that's organizing this webinar. Holy Cross Orthodox Press has published it in book form. This document addresses contemporary issues in a sustained manner that is actually unusual for the Orthodox Church. Issues like poverty and racism, human rights and reproductive technology, science and the environment. The purpose of the document is to provide a reference on vital challenges in ways that are consistent with living as Orthodox Christians. It's basically a translation of Christian teachings into the language of social compassion. Because by understanding the social principles of our church, we can actually shift the narrative from threat or mere survival or fear to compassion and justice. And so the church can assume its proper prophetic role. It can articulate the moral response to climate change and COVID-19. Economy and politics decide who will survive, who will have clean water, who will have health care, but economy and politics will often do so at the expense of the poor and minorities. In this sense, climate change and COVID are wake-up calls. You know, we often hear it stated that COVID-19 is the great equalizer, but it really isn't. It's actually what's exposed structural inequality and institutional corruption and systemic racism. The world will change through climate change. The world will change as a result of the pandemic. The question is, what direction will it take? Will the global economy be more exclusive and divisive? Or will it be more inclusive, more equitable, more sustainable? I think these are the questions we must ask ourselves and one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Father John. Always a pleasure to hear you. I'm looking forward now to seeing our co-host, Bishop Estevez, along with Dr. Leanne. And His Excellency will now take the podium, if you will, the virtual podium, to introduce our next speaker. Thank you.
Yes, I am honored to introduce Dr. Leanne Clements of the Jacksonville University. She's also the chair of the Committee on Integral Ecology of the Diocese of St. Augustine. And she earned her BA in biology from the University of Virginia and her master's and PhD in marine science from the University of South Carolina. She's a professor of biology and marine science at Jacksonville University, and during her 32 years as a professor, she has served as chair of the Division of Science and Mathematics and Dean of the College of Arts and Science, Associate Provost, and now Director of Academic Integrity. Dr. Clements has taught many students in courses such as Introduction to Marine Science, Biological Oceanography, Oral Communications in the Biological Sciences, and Physiological Ecology. Dr. Clements served on the boards of the National Conferences for Undergraduate Research and the Jacksonville Museum of Science and History. Her research deals around adaptations of marine organisms to changing environmental conditions. She has long been an advocate for science communication, informal education about the environment and protecting our natural world. Dr. Clement, go on, go forth.
Thank you, Bishop Estevez. I also want to thank Bishop Demetrios and the St. Photios for helping to bring this webinar to fruition, and also to Father John for his remarks. Today, I want to talk about what environmental lessons we've learned from the pandemic. And I'm going to be very practical and somewhat scientific. The theological and moral imperatives were well outlined by Father John. I'm going to talk about what we can do and why we should do it. Next slide, please. So there's some good news and some not so good news with regard to the environmental lessons from the pandemic. First of all of that shutdown where everybody was staying at home and working from home and not driving their cars, and lots of businesses and industries were shut down and there wasn't as much boat traffic or airline traffic, was kind of a pause And it really was just a pause. We saw cleaner air and clearer water in a lot of places, lower carbon emissions. I don't know about you, but walking outside, it was quieter. There was less hubbub and machine noise. And I think it gave us, in some ways, a glimpse of what is possible. However, the not so good news, it was only a pause and not a reset. We did see some negative effects. Single-use plastics pollution has gone way up, particularly medical waste, but also masks, gloves, and carry-out containers, a much higher level of plastic pollution. Also, recycling was limited, mostly because essential workers were not available to help out with that recycling. And that is an industry that, in fact, uses energy. And unfortunately, we also saw, as alluded to by Father John, increased exposure of vulnerable members of society, whether they were the elderly or the poor and disenfranchised. Next slide, please. So I have some pictures, and these were available on the internet. I've got the websites. This is from ABC News, and this is, I believe it's Mumbai, but I might be wrong about the city. The top picture is before the shutdown. It's an area well known for air pollution. Excuse me. And during the shutdown, when everybody was at home and nobody was driving around and industry was shut down, the air cleared and you could actually see all the way across the city. Next slide. This is a set of pictures from Venice, and there were some pictures from Venice that were not accurate. These are on the left, which you see is a typical Venetian canal, tourists in a gondola, and usually there's quite a bit of boat traffic. You can actually see in this picture multiple gondolas, but there would also be motorboats that would go through these areas. And the water tended to be murky, right? You couldn't see to the bottom. On the right-hand picture, you can see that because of lowered boat traffic, the silt and the particulates have settled out, and you can actually see through the water to the bottom of the canal. That doesn't mean that there's no pollution. It just means that everything's settled to the bottom. Next slide. Here's the negatives. These are pictures of discarded gloves and masks and other trash found near waterways and in cities and on city streets. And I don't know about you, but I certainly saw this as well. Parking lots of the grocery store, all kinds of places, but the beaches were one of the places that we saw this. Next slide. Here's another picture. This is a worker cleaning up the beach and collecting masks. And almost all of these masks are not the fabric masks that people have made and wash and keep. They are instead the disposable single-use masks, whether they're sort of the N95 type mask or the surgical masks. They are all made of plastic fibers. And so this is an indicator of personal protective equipment that's been discarded in a wanton way and that's ending up as pollution on beaches and unfortunately getting washed into the ocean. Next slide. There's some positive news. Some wildlife responded positively to our retreat from being outside and moving around. These are humpback whales off the coast of California, and you can tell by this picture that they're actually quite close to shore. Normally they would not be able to be this close to shore because of boat traffic, but since nobody was out in their boats, the whales could be much, much closer to shore. And you can see here 4 spouts, so at least 4 whales in that pod. Next slide. So I've got here some infographics from Venngage. They produced some really wonderful infographics, and please do not dwell on all of the details, but what I wanted to highlight here was that these show some very specific things about the way the Earth responded during the pandemic and during the shutdown. On the left, the impact on carbon emissions, and by and large, worldwide, carbon emissions went down during the time when everybody was shut down. They've started to go back up, so it's not been quite enough to make a huge difference, but we did see a dip. Less domestic air traffic, less carbon monoxide, fewer airline flights. Carbon emissions in China fell by 25%. And so overall, you could see less air pollution from the burning of fossil fuels. Unfortunately, the impact on waste, that's the center panel, was not so positive. And in almost all cases, there was an increase in the packaging used for materials and in plastic waste, whether it was medical waste or carry-out bags and carry-out containers. And then finally, on the far right-hand panel, the impact on wildlife. And I am sad to say that many of the reports were in fact fake news. They were either reports of animals being in cities who already actually are in those cities. And so there were pictures that were actually taken years ago and put on the internet as though it was brand new, or misreports of animals moving back into an area when in fact they're actually already there. We just don't normally see them during the daytime. They tend to be around at night. That whole idea of dolphins in the canals in Venice, that was in fact faked. So I guess it's a mixed bag. I think we should pay attention to the idea that the pause button shows that we can reduce carbon emissions, which is a huge driver of climate change, the greenhouse effect, and that burning of fossil fuels is in fact the #1 component in increasing global temperatures. And we're all to blame for that as we drive our cars and take airline flights and run our air conditioners and rely on energy that's produced by fossil fuels. Next slide. So if we can recreate the positive effects of this pause, and we can slow down consumption in a way that we did not as much during the pandemic, we can reduce waste and reduce emissions and air and water pollution, we might be able to get the earth and its systems to renew. The fact is that this is going to require effort from a lot of people. And it will be magnified if we can work as groups and as a unified whole, rather than just as isolated individuals. In short, we must pay attention. And I think that's part of what Father John was saying, that it requires us to really think about that choice that we make and the fact that everything is interconnected, that we need to choose not excess, but rather living with less. Next slide. So the committee that I've chaired for the, go back. Thank you. The Committee on Integral Ecology for the Diocese of St. Augustine. I'm the chair, and there are 4 other members. Dr. Daniels from Flagler College, he's faculty in the Ministry Formation Program in the Diocese of St. Augustine and an instructor of religion at Flagler. Mike Day, director of the Office of Family Life. Lisa Reineman, who is the St. John's River Keeper, and Dr. Chris Williams, Chair of Science and Mathematics at St. Joseph's. And the 5 of us, along with some other members who help staff and help us out with subcommittees, have been working for about 2 years to come up with a plan for how the Diocese of St. Augustine can move forward. I've given you the URL for the ecology initiative for the Diocese of St. Augustine in the lower left-hand corner of the slide. Next slide, please. So our document that is our foundational document is called Co-Responsible Attitudes for Resources and the Environment, CARE, which is a nod to Laudato Si, the papal encyclical, Care for Our Common Home. And this is a plan for how we can move forward. And there are 3 areas of action: formation, reducing consumption and waste, and advocacy. And 3 scales of action. That is the personal or individual scale, the family or group scale, and then the organizational scale. The idea being that if we don't act as individuals first in all 3 of these areas, we can't magnify the action as a family or group or as an organization. But if we do act as individuals, we have an opportunity to spread the word by being individual advocates to our families and groups and to our organizations. Next slide. So we have goals in these areas. And if you think about it this way, the first couple of goals have to do with formation. And that is engage in meaningful discussions about care for creation. And that meaningful discussion encompasses the spiritual, the scriptural, the religious imperative, and the moral imperative, as well as what science tells us about nature and the environmental concerns that surround us. The second one is improving knowledge of the papal encyclical Laudato Si, the church teachings, broadly writ, and scripture of care for creation. And so those are the formational pieces. Learn, study, pray, think. Start to really incorporate this into who you are meant to be. And then the second, or the third goal is about our actions. Actually, the third and fourth goals are about our actions. The third one about commitment to reducing single-use plastics, carbon emissions, trash, and trash production in our daily lives. Really, it's about a commitment to reduce consumption. And because single-use plastics are made out of petroleum, use of petroleum in basically using fossil fuels adds more carbon emissions. Using excess energy adds carbon emissions. And then trash production in our daily lives is an indication of significant waste, not recycling, not reusing, disposing of things that are excess. So if we commit to doing with less, to reusing, to being frugal, the values that my parents had, that their parents had, and instead of a culture of consumption, we become a bit more aware of the resource use and the strain that we're putting on the environment. The fourth one, care for the vulnerable members of our communities. And this has to do with some of the things that Father John talked about. Those who are less economically advantaged suffer the most. They are often in areas where sea level rise floods their homes and they can't escape, where severe storms will cause them the most damage. Think back to Hurricane Katrina, but also think even to the most recent hurricanes. Those people who could not get out were those that suffered the most, but also homes that were destroyed that cannot be rebuilt by those folks. They either don't have insurance or they don't have the wherewithal to rebuild. Those are examples. And those extreme storms are a natural byproduct of increasing climate change and increasing numbers and intensity of storms. Finally, outreach, and that outreach at home, school, workplace, community, and place of worship is the advocacy piece, that you can be the role model for those who see you. If you take care, if you embody these goals and make them part of who you are, other people will notice. And you can expand the reach of this effort. Next slide. So finally, the last thing we've want to encourage in our plan is for people to take the St. Francis Pledge. And this is found at the U.S. Council of Catholic Bishops website. Basically embodies all of those goals as well. We pledge to pray and reflect on the duty to care for God's creation and protect the poor and vulnerable. We pledge to learn about and educate others on the causes and moral dimensions of climate change. We pledge to assess how we, as individuals and in our families, parishes, and other affiliations, can contribute to climate change by our own energy use, consumption, waste, etc. We pledge to act to change our choices and behaviors to reduce the ways we contribute to climate change. And finally, we pledge to advocate for Catholic principles, and I would say Christian principles, and priorities in climate change discussions and decisions, especially as they impact those who are poor and vulnerable. And with that, I'll close. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. What enjoyable once again to hear you. And could we have our cameras on for Father John and Bishop Esteves, please? There we go. Questions are coming in, and we're going to start shortly. I remind everyone that you can ask the questions, and we will make every effort to direct them and have them answered accordingly. So let me begin. Father, I think this would be more for Father John. By how can we help our political leaders understand the spiritual impact of environmental deterioration?
By taking a position politically. I mean, you can change the world by praying in your room. But if you want to change policy, you have to take a political stand. You have to see where your political leaders are and what their objectives are, what their priorities are, what their interests are. And if you don't call them out, or at least direct them to where you think the church thinks that this moral line should direct them, then you're not doing your job as a citizen, really. You, again, it's a matter of translating the principles that you believe in, the teachings, the tradition, the gospel message into social action.
Thank you, Father. Okay, continue. Another question on probably the same line. How can the church take responsibility for preaching a gospel of environmental responsibility?
Leanne, do you want to try?
I don't know that I'm qualified for how the church can take a responsibility other than perhaps one of the things that we've suggested as we move forward with the organizational level, that parishes can help by having committees of parishioners that work towards environmental issues in their localities. I think acting locally, lots of people acting locally, can certainly make a difference. And certainly that's where we see the differences. It's really hard to grapple with a worldwide problem. It just seems so big. It seems like I can't make a difference, right? So as individuals, we can really only grapple with those problems that we see very locally. And I think that our churches, our parishes, and our communities can help to deal with those local issues. And we can organize around those, whether it's a neighborhood cleanup, whether it's pledging to recycle or have fewer disposable materials used at our parish functions or in our schools, where we can encourage people to, reduce their energy bills. It's good for them, but it's also good for the environment.
I wonder if I can add there, Your Grace. That's the practical part where especially I would say we Orthodox are very often lacking, and we have something on an ecumenical level to learn from our ecumenical partners, the Roman Catholic Church, and the way it's embraced the Pope's encyclical that our Patriarch has been sending out encyclicals since 1989, and people are beginning to listen. So that practical side is hugely important. The question, however, also referred to preaching, and I would say it's important to sort of reverse the way we've seen creation and environment in terms of our preaching as something secondary or peripheral. I don't think that it should be just a matter of every 1st of September preaching a good sermon on the environment, or maybe going out and throwing some flowers in the water or whatever. I think it's crucial that we make the environment. I mean, how do you not make creation part of every aspect of our preaching? How do you teach New Testament without talking about incarnation and creation? How do you teach Old Testament without talking about creation? How do you teach liturgy without talking about creation? How do you teach systematic theology? How do you teach pastoral theology? How do you talk to anyone and just deal with the soul? You know, the more we reduce, the more we diminish the focus of our spiritual or religious attention, the more we'll get it wrong. The more open we can be to include the body as well as the soul, creation as well as the body, all of humanity, and not just the Orthodox. The more open we are, the more likely we're going to be on the correct sort of wavelength.
Thank you. Father, let me ask a quick question which needs clarification. I know I've heard the pronouncement that the bishop made in Cyprus, unfortunately. Someone is asking if you can clarify the context that you were saying about a leader of our church telling parents to keep their children home instead of them wearing demonic masks. I don't think they heard you correctly. And the connection to this environmental chat, I missed it. Thank you kindly, they say. I don't think it'll take a long explanation.
Very simply, I was talking about science there and taking science seriously. You cannot just go out on your own way as a religious leader. You have to take into consideration all that's happening around you, all of the suffering, all of the data. The sad thing is, for a long time, religion avoided or was threatened by science. And this is not the sort of time or the sort of crisis that can tolerate that kind of relationship between science and religion. So just being open to the science, being open to the data that's given to us about creation as it is about the virus and wearing a mask.
Thank you. Professor Leanne, I think this one's for you more. How do we deal with I probably just want to say perception. How do we deal with the perceived by many How do we deal with the perceived by many clash between religion and science?
It's a great question, and one that I'm asked frequently. I'm clearly a practicing Roman Catholic. I have faith, but I am also clearly a scientist. And I think that it's a false dichotomy. And I think it's a false dichotomy that comes out of a historical, some of the history of the church long ago, when science sort of upended understanding of how the universe worked. And that was threatening, because it did sort of turn things upside down. And the order that had been preached, so to speak, that humanity was the center of the universe. And then all of a sudden it's like, what, we're a solar system? The sun is in the middle? It's not the center of the universe. In fact, we are part of the universe. We are part of ecology. We may have a special place as part of God's creation, but we're just a piece of that web that's interconnected in ecology. That's why we're an integral ecology committee, right? Humanity is part, it's integrated into creation. It's not apart from it to play with it as it wants without any repercussions. So science is in fact our understanding of creation from our human perspective. It allows us to discern how things work. And those workings were part of the way God made the world. You know, the biblical story of creation is not designed as a science book. And that's where that false dichotomy comes in. You can't say 7 days is 7 days. I'm sorry, humans invented the concept of days. All right, God did not invent the concept of days as we know them. And so we can't understand the mind of God, but we can start to take a look at how things work and the natural order of things, and recognize what our place is in them and how we must work with the rest of creation. And so that's my answer. This dichotomy between science and religion should not exist. We are all part of the same.
Yeah, and you speak like a theologian, believe it or not. So I agree with everything you've said. I like to be self-critical, though, as well. I don't know whether you face these things in the Roman Catholic Church. I know in many evangelical sort of communities, it's a problem, but there are many Orthodox bishops in many Orthodox churches, not just the Greeks. And this is something that there's pan-Orthodox agreement on, that simply haven't heard that message, that simply don't get that there isn't a distinction between the two, or you know, a false sort of a distinction. I mean, the latest craze in Greece, for instance, which is unconscionable, as I say, for any religious leader to be blurting out, you know, these teachings, is wear a jacket to church, not a mask. I think they've got to listen a little bit to the science. I think they've got to make those connections, which as leaders they are responsible for. They should not be making statements like this.
Thank you. Let's go on to, since you brought up the evangelicals, Father, a question from some dear Protestant friends of mine. Father John, what would you suggest to Protestants about reimagining their sacramental practice to help shape formation about creation care?
I mean, I don't know how I would sort of translate the word reimagine in sort of theological terms, but, and I can't speak for evangelicals. I know that as Orthodox, we do need to Is it reimagine? Is it literally translate? Is it actually just translating your beliefs into policy and into personal practice? In terms of the sacraments as Orthodox, how do you not see creation as spilling out through the liturgy? How do you not, one abbot on Mount Ethos, one of my sort of favorite theologians, and there are not too many favorite ones on Mount Ethos, but he is one of them. Father Vasilios of Iviron would say, you know, you walk into the church, you're actually in the whole world. And then you walk out of the church after the liturgy, and you're actually still in the church, because the whole world is the church. That connection between sacrament and life is, I think, why we need to reimagine or re-envision, revive the sacramental life.
That's wonderful. Thank you. The next question, they're directing it to Bishop Esteves, but I think Dr. Clements, you can probably answer it. To what extent can the diocese, I'm assuming they mean the Diocese of St. Augustine, to what extent can the diocese incentivize its parishes to be more environmentally conscious and active, aside from perhaps encouraging priests to preach on the subject?
Wow. I'm not sure that I can answer about incentives other than convincing them that it's in fact in their own best interest. That's, I think, the best incentive that I can think of. If you can save on your costs by doing some of the things that also save environment, that's a real positive. As far as tangible incentives, you know, having a cleaner, safer environment should be incentive enough. I'm sorry, that's sort of my perspective. Maybe Bishop Esteves can come up with a better, more tangible idea.
Well, I am proud to say that you may go to the web of the Cathedral of St. Augustine, and you will be impressed how one parish, the first parish, is what it's doing about it. Like Dr. Clements said, this has to be local. So it has to be at the parish level, at the home level, at the school level, and the Cathedral web shows the way.
One of our priests has asked, I think that dovetails on the last question, is there any way to mandate, a good suggestion, that all Catholic and Orthodox parishes, churches use here, use reusable cups for coffee fellowship events, meetings, and such? I think that would be a wonderful practical way to at least begin. The one pet peeve I have are the plastic water bottles. That I know that's a big problem. And maybe Dr. Clements, you want to say a few words about that?
Yeah, you know, I think that part of the conundrum that we're facing right now is reusable cups are definitely a better choice for the environment. The investment up front in those may be a burden for some parishes, unless what you do is you ask everybody to bring their own. And if the parish actually has a stock of coffee cups, I don't know, my office certainly seems to collect them. I don't know where they come from, you know, but coffee mugs, unless they've already got them, investing in buying them is a pretty significant investment. And then there's the fact that, you know, during a pandemic, first of all, we're not having events, but how do you wash them? How do you get them clean? And do you have that possibility? And I think some parishes don't. So I think mandating is probably a little strong, certainly suggesting that that's a real positive. You know, reusable water bottles, having the ability for people to refill a water bottle rather than bringing a disposable is definitely a good idea.
Well, I am proud to say that at the St. Photios National Shrine, upon my arrival, we did switch from disposable cups to glass, coffee cups and dishes. And I know it was a little difficult of a transition, but we did it. So I'm happy that we were able to contribute to that.
Our diocesan offices have done the same thing. I noticed the last time I was at a meeting at the diocesan offices, there were actually glasses and ceramic coffee cups, whereas the first time I came, we had paper and styrofoam. So
My metropolitan,
good job, Bishop.
my metropolitan Chicago, God rest his soul, would never allow us to use paper even before it was fashionable. He thought this was more appropriate. In any case, next question, how can technological choices such as solar power, electrical vehicles, and improved building and home help with these efforts?
Oh, there's absolutely no doubt. Actually, driving your car using a gasoline engine probably contributes, particularly in cities, more to air pollution and CO2 than you might believe. So going to electric vehicles, if they are a reasonable choice, and there's a lot of reasons that people can't do that. They're expensive, they don't go far enough, we don't have enough charging stations. I mean, I get the hurdles that we must overcome, but that's a real positive. The same is true with solar panels and solar energy, wind energy. Those are all renewable energy sources that do not require us to burn fossil fuel to power the very things that make life possible, that makes it possible for us to work from home, to do these webinars. We can't do this if we don't have electricity, if we don't have technology. And so we need a source of reliable power, but we need to have that reliable power be generated in a way that does not add emissions to the atmosphere. So I think those are fabulous, fabulous ideas. I think it's also very, very true that getting everybody to convert to that scaling that up is going to take quite a bit of time, and it may require more effort and more time than we've really got, unless there's a serious investment in that technology and in those industries. It's an area that should be invested in, and it's an area where jobs can be created.
We had initially said that this webinar would go till 8. If you don't mind, can we go about 10 more minutes? Is that okay with everybody? We have a number of questions. I feel bad if we don't get to at least most of them.
Okay.
To both speakers, what is it in the human condition that not unless tragedy is on the doorstep does someone make a change? How can we effect the change on a one-on-one interaction?
Should I answer that from an evolutionary perspective? Because, I mean, okay, I'm going to answer that from the science perspective. We evolved to be concerned about our immediate survival. We are not good as organisms of planning ahead and thinking long term. We react to the next disaster, to the next immediate need. That's how we're wired, so to speak. And so it requires really serious thought and kind of pushing back on that fight or flight response to think long term rather than short term, what's satisfying to me now. And so that's the reason that we tend to only react when there's an emergency. And I think that's just, it's just part of how we evolved.
Father John?
I agree. I mean, if that's a scientific perspective, then I would say it's exactly the same in the perspective of the church and theology. That, you know, when we paint icons in the Orthodox Church, when a face, an image is sort of in profile, it's considered a depiction of sin. When you want to show communion and openness, you show two eyes, you show the full face. So we need to open just a little bit further up from what we see as our immediate interests and concerns, even pain. It's important just to begin to think of someone else, of something else, and it takes time to make those choices. Even before the thinking happens, I would say, it's a matter of restoring this conscience of who we are as human beings, open to one another, and that's how you make choices. If I know that what I do matters to someone else, and the fact is, as human beings, because we're selfish, we tend not to notice until that person retaliates, until that person is hurt, and we realize that a loved one is in pain, and so we try to redress our conduct, and that's what's happened with the environment. That's what happened with our planet. And if we're not seeing that, then I think we're blind. I think we are being selfish. And there was a question earlier, I don't want to totally ignore it, that was posted about, you know, is Father John being too political? Why is he bashing Trump? And, you know, this is a diatribe against the Republican Party and whatever. And it's not about that. It's about practicing what you preach. And if we practice what we preach, if we look to doing things that affect others in a positive way, in a compassionate way, which is why we wear masks. It's the science, and it's because we should care enough to wear a mask. It's the same thing when it comes to what you drive, where you go, how long you drive. Do you really have to go that far? What are you shopping? What are you buying? Where's it made? Where was this fruit from? So it's a matter of, this is not Trump. In fact, neither the Trumps nor the Clintons would be interested in any of this simplicity or frugality. It's not partisanship. It's almost like a corruption of a moral way of life. Neither of these parties really care about the poor. Sometimes they speak to that, but actually caring. I'm talking political action here. And that's why I say it's important that once you understand spiritually where you stand, that you also take the practical decisions and choices, that you also take the political decisions and choices. And again, this is not about Trump or Clinton and their spiritual life. Both of them may actually experience the divine light in their prayer at night. But politically, I can call them out because they're wrong.
Following up on, you used the word frugality. One of our listeners has asked, to promote the virtue of frugality seems un-American. Can you offer a less offensive word to that virtue?
Huh.
I'm not asking the question, I'm merely the messenger.
I find that interesting because I think my grandparents and my parents thought of frugality as very American. They learned it during World War II, when frugality was the way you showed your patriotism. You conserved resources so they were available for fighting the good fight. So I think those that think it is un-American are thinking only of American as a consumerist, capitalist sort of entity rather than a democracy, which I think is actually a better definition for America. And democracy is not, can I consume everything that I can consume? It's, is there room for everyone at this table so that everyone can consume what they need? And then if there's something left over, fine, you can, have some more, but I shouldn't be the one who grabs it all for me.
Father John, would you suggest possibly the word ascetic, as we understand it in Orthodoxy, to be a better word?
comfortable answers, Your Grace. I mean, all right, I can use the word fasting. How un-American's that one? I can use the word simplicity. How un-American's that one? I can use being on the cross. I mean, that's our symbol as Christians. How un-American is it, that one? So yeah, it actually hurts. You know, as Father Hopko used to say, if you have found a comfortable way of sitting on the cross, you're probably not on the cross. So yeah, it is uncomfortable. My tradition teaches me that it's actually not necessarily wrong if it's uncomfortable. It may be helping me realize that there's more to being an American than just having whatever I want whenever I want. And I'm so glad that Leanne mentioned the word democracy. I think that's a good translation of how, you know, we translate compassion and caring for other people.
Thank you. Many of the issues we face are built into the design and structure of society. Climate change, for instance, is built into the transportation system. We have built society around fossil fuels. How can Christians address this type of issue?
My answer is you do have choices, and you also have a voice, and you can make that voice heard by advocating, by voting your conscience. If you want more mass transit, you can encourage that to be the policy in your locality. You can ride your bike, you can walk, you don't have to get in your car by yourself and drive everywhere. Those are personal choices, and you can work with others in your area. So I think it does require that. I'm looking at the grassroots level of making this a change. But you can in fact, if this is important to you, you can help change the way transportation happens in your locality, because you have voice and you have vote, and you can vote so that those things happen. It just requires a lot of will, and it may require a lot of time. And I will also say that it's likely to require money to change. And that means, are you willing to spend your money that way as opposed to another way?
Yeah.
It's your choice.
Because you do spend money anyway.
You do. It's a choice.
It's a matter, Your Grace, I think, of information and becoming more aware. And there's no excuse today for not, doing that. There's no reason, no justification. I could put in a little plug here for a small group. It's a small, but not to be sort of ignored group called the Orthodox Fellowship of the Transfiguration. And it's like a seed that's there that is as big as people want it to be, really, and as much as people want to be involved. But if you look them up online, they offer ways for Orthodox parishes here and Orthodox families to try and practice what we preach. They even have a manual of sort of greening an Orthodox parish. So there's stuff out there if we're willing to look for it, and if we're not willing to dismiss it outrightly and immediately as just partisan or political or whatever, but something that we actually care about.
One of the viewers mentions the book Greeting the Orthodox Parish, and would like to know, are there other resources you could recommend that could communicate the relationship between environment and spirituality?
I'm gonna.
You're going. Look again.
Yeah. You want me to? Okay, I was just going to say, if you go to the Ecology website at the Diocese of St. Augustine, our foundational document, that care document, has a whole list of references, scholarly references, that we have used to sort of build our argument along all of these three pillars. And so there are a number of resources there. I think we also reference the United States Council of Catholic Bishops that has a lot of references as well and resources available. So
you're not starting from scratch, Your Grace. I think that there's a lot out there, and this should be an ecumenical effort. It should be a joint effort. It should be a global effort. And if we're not working with others, maybe we're on the wrong track to begin with. So it is huge that this event is organized by an ecumenical department. It is huge that 2 bishops from, sister churches are involved. It is huge that Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew and Patriarch Francis, Pope Francis are close friends, that in his encyclical Laudato Si, the Pope makes reference to the Patriarch in such an unprecedented way. Never has an Orthodox leader been mentioned in such a positive and such a comprehensive way in an early part, as an example, in a papal encyclical. So the seeds are out there for this ecumenical sort of partnership, and we should be doing more of it.
I know the time is late and there's 21 more questions, but I want to end with just one comment from somebody and then a question. Some of the reason I'm stating this one is because it's impressive. Some of us are not viewing from the States. Climate change and environmental integrity are not this narrow, is their comment. And the next question I have is there an historical benchmark for when the first world countries posed from citizen-centered to consumer-driven?
I'll take the first one, Leanne, you take the second. I guess I should say that's exactly why I was talking about becoming aware, being reminded, and sometimes it hurts to be reminded. So we're talking about a global issue, and I still think, in the way I speak at least, that America's the center of all. So thank you for the reminder. Sorry I had to be reminded. And that's exactly what we need to be remembering more and more often. And in fact, we should almost tilt the balance the other way, because we know that other parts of the world, poorer parts of the world, hotter parts of the world where sea level is rising, to the point beyond survival, they're the ones that are sort of setting the pace here and will affect us, whether or not we know, whether or not we pay attention to them. So thank you for the reminder.
Doctor?
I don't have an answer for when the first world countries, when the industrialized countries started it all. I mean, we know that CO2 in the atmosphere started during the Industrial Revolution in Europe in the 1800s. So that would be my first start. And I would suggest that consumerism probably started with the production of goods that came along with that. But I'm not an authority in that aspect of consumer economy. I will say that the United States and Europe, United States in particular, consumes vastly more of the energy than would be appropriate just for our population. That our percentage consumption is way higher, which is why talking about this as an American problem gets to the root of the issue of excessive consumerism and the impact we could have here in the United States if we did more, if we were more conscious. All right, that's one part of it. But I think the second part is the point I made earlier. It is a huge problem. It is a worldwide problem, but it's so hard to grasp on that scale for almost everybody that you can only think and act locally. We're human beings. That's just sort of the way we have to think. And if we can all make a difference locally, and we all make a difference locally, then that becomes a worldwide impact.
I'll tell you exactly when it starts, Your Grace. It starts exactly at the moment when you close this webinar. It starts exactly at the moment when we fold our laptops. That's when we're going to know which choice are we making. Are we still governed by this consumer sort of push, or can we make a small dent in that sort of wrong attitude? So what's going to happen after this webinar? What's the Ecumenical Department doing after this webinar? What's the Orthodox Fellowship of the Transfiguration doing after this webinar? What are our two churches doing together after this webinar? I think that's when it starts.
I have several documents I'm going to send to the diocese tomorrow. So I've been working.
No doubt. And I'm grateful to both of you and to my brother in Christ. I'm going to close this portion, even though there are 20 questions left. One person is asking if there's going to be co-conferences or interactive programs to continue these dialogues. And they thank us for the session. I certainly hope so. I will check with our technical people if these questions that were not answered live can be shared with our speakers, and possibly they can answer those questions privately. Also, I was asked to mention that recordings will be available on the Facebook pages of the St. Photios National Shrine, the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, and the Department of Inter-Orthodox Ecumenical and Interfaith Relations from the Archdiocese. I'm assuming that we are going to share it, of course, with the Diocese of St. Augustine, and they can distribute it to their social media the way that they find appropriate. After we have 20 more questions, and I don't think we have time to go through them. This has been riveting, and I thank you both, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Bishop Demetrios, in this very exciting presentation. Really, we are in need of opening our hearts to an ecological conversion and action. And really, the evidence is there, the melting ice caps, the fires in California and in so many places, the way that we see the biodiversity, and yet we are one humanity. We are all interconnected. Our call is to care, and we want a world that is peaceful, a sustainable world. I am very happy that this 5th anniversary of Laudato Si, it is going to be a whole year, not only one day anniversary, but a whole year of awareness in what Father John said, that awareness and that formation for the entire year, because we are deeply interconnected and interdependent. We cannot be isolated. And I am very pleased to know as well that this fall, on October 15, the Vatican is calling for a conference on reinventing the global educational alliance. And that will bring a global gathering to respond to the point where we are. I really like, I would like to end my presentation praying with Pope Francis. Help us to show creative solidarity in addressing the consequences of this global pandemic. Make us courageous to embrace the changes that are needed in search of the common good. Now more than ever, may we feel that we are interconnected in our efforts to lift up the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. The cry of the earth is equally important as the cry of the poor. And we make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you all for tuning in. At our height, we had 132 participants, and I thank our speakers, Father John, Dr. Clements, and of course, my dear brother, Bishop Esteves. It's so good to see all of you. This webinar will be made available, like I said, and I wish you all a very, very good night, and the blessings of the new ecclesiastical year upon all of us.